Seriously.
It's like, I tried. Okay. I'm not sure. Do you have any announcements you want to start with, or introductions or anything first?
Oh, we have let me introduce the minute.
Okay, good.
We're taking care of last minute business here.
And you probably have other things you want to say too.
We'll save that for the end.
Ah, okay.
We'll get to you right away.
Ah, okay, good.
So let's, thank you everybody for coming, taking time out of your work day. We have a really awesome presentation here today. Just to tell you a little bit about Dr. Schultz. He is a Hamline University professor, and he has taught the ethics class for 15 years there. He also holds an appointment at the Minnesota Law School. He's regularly interviewed in the local, national, and international media about politics and ethics, and his comments have appeared in the New York Times, Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. And also he's been on NPR, MSNBC, and CNN, and he is the author of more than 30 books and over 100 articles.
Yep.
So with that, let's welcome.
Thank you. Good. And I teach environmental policy. All right, so that means anything. Cool. All right, so I'm going to ask you a question right off the bat. Imagine we did an experiment. And in this experiment, I'm going to want to show an answer. Right? I told you that what you were required to do was to use increasing levels of electricity to punish people for not remembering word pairs. And it starts at 5 volts and it goes all the way up to 450 volts. How many of you in this room think you would be willing to go up to, or would go up to 450 volts to zap somebody? Have I seen any hands? See, you know the real answer. Okay, yeah. Almost nobody knows this. Okay. Yeah, because 450 volts won't kill you. It's the ampage like that. Okay, so you've given it away already. Leave, idiot! Get out at this point. Okay. But even if Mr. Big Mouth hadn't said anything here, okay. Would any of you have raised your hand to say, yeah, I would put 450 volts in people? All right. Good. Let's keep that in mind, because that's going to be the premise here. All right. So let me tell you a little about what I want to try to do and make this kind of fun also. I generally don't do PowerPoints and so forth, but this one actually works with a PowerPoint in terms of what I want to do. I usually can bore people just by talking instead of having to actually do anything else. But one of the things that I've done for many years at Hamline, teaching. Do I need to stay in one spot, by the way, so I don't confuse you?
Doesn't matter.
Okay, I just want to be sure, because if you want me to stay in one spot, I'll try to.
Okay.
Okay. One of the things that I teach at Hamline is sort of a graduate ethics class. Meets at night. It's usually working adults, which means people are working during the day. They come to class at night at 6 o'clock. It goes till 9 o'clock, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I never asked people to do over the years is to either send me links, or in the old days, it used to be cut out articles from the newspaper, but people would do that anyhow. And what was so great about it, it was always about people behaving badly. What's great about teaching an ethics class is we're never at a loss for people doing really stupid things out there. And so we'll get the stories of what? Lying, cheating, embezzling, doing all kinds of horrible things to one another in the workplace setting. And there's sort of a couple of questions that always start to happen when we start to look at those things there. We start to talk about it, we start to have some really interesting discussions in class, and inevitably, somewhere along the line there, we'll start to get to the reasons in terms of why people did the things that they did. You know, why did they lie, steal, cheat, et cetera, et cetera. And we'll have a conversation all about that. But then we get to something a little bit different, where we'll be talking about people doing really stupid things, or breaking the law, or whatever like that. And then inevitably somebody will always turn to me and say, well, the reason why that person did what they did is because they're a bad person. They're a horrible, nasty person. And then, of course, that would flip it around, where I would ask them and say, well, would you ever do that? And they would say, I wouldn't do it. And think about how we like to think about the world sometimes. We always like to think about the world, if I can use kind of a Western movie motif here, in terms of the people who wear black hats versus white hats. You know, that bad people generally do bad things, and therefore those stories of people lying, cheating, embezzling, all kinds of stuff like that, is usually the story about people doing bad things. And if I can sort of make sure I use my PowerPoint here, you know, let's make sure that is right. Let's see if we have my, click it over, let's see, right here. We can sort of say that, you know, we're thinking about the question of why do good people in organizations do bad things. We can say it's because they're bad people. And we sort of think about our paradigms of really bad people in like the last 15 or 20 years. We think of Enron Corporation. Some of you might remember that from a long time ago. That basically swindles people out of zillions of dollars, does all kinds of real horrible things. And then we think of Bernie Madoff. You know, Bernie Madoff, you know, who runs a Ponzi scheme, you know, that embezzles about $60 billion out of people. Eventually, I think he got, what, like 800 years in prison or something like that. I'm serious when I give it's like an old vaudeville routine that says that, you know, a person like that who's 70 years old gets sentenced to 800 years in prison, and he says, I'll never live that long, and the judge says, of course, well, just do the best you can, or something like that. But you know, we wonder about people like this, and we think, well, gosh, to do something like that, they truly have to be really horrible people, like I said. And so generally what we wind up saying is what? Is that the world is in terms of good people generally do good things. I usually say that, I don't know about you, if someone wants to raise their hand here, are any of you here certified as angels? I didn't think so. Okay, neither am I. But the reason why I mean to make it here is that we're all human, aren't we? We all make mistakes. We all ethically do stupid things occasionally. As I sometimes say, we occasionally slip on the ethical banana peel. But, you know, but generally, we think good people do good things, but bad people do bad things. So those stories of lying, cheating, embezzling, et cetera, are usually stories all about where we divide the world in half. And many of us will say, it would never be me who would do these really horrible things. But really, is the ethical world that cut and dry? And that's one of the things that I talk about in my classes. That I know over the years, when I go out and do professional training for organizations, especially for organizations that have a requirement that you have to be there in an ethics training class, lawyers, accountants, other professions, I can tell you what life is like. As these people show up to my class, they're sitting in a row like this. They're sitting in a chair. They got their little like laptops, or they got their little you know Androids or whatever. And they're playing with it, and they're turning to the person next to them and saying, "This really sucks, you know. That the only reason why I have to be here is because some bozo in my organization did something wrong, and because of that, I've got to sit in this stupid class, you know, for 2 hours or 3 hours or 4 hours, and listen to Schultz, you know, wax on and on about ethics or something like that." And it's true, because a lot of people will say to me, especially lawyers and accountants, if I weren't here, I could be out billing somebody something. I could be making money, and by the fact that I'm here, I can't make any money. And so they really hate it. It really bothers them. So they don't want to be there at all. So we think about it in terms of how people want to say, I'm a good person. I would never do these really bad things. So I really don't know why you're really forcing me to be here in terms of the class. And I'm interested instead in a couple of different possibilities. Now, I'm going to take my example here and actually change it a little bit, because I'm actually fascinated by the story of a 58-year-old accountant out in Wasika who embezzled $1.6 million from his clients. But I'm going to change it around here, and I'm going to pick on somebody like you instead, okay? And I don't know your name, so pardon me if I point or something. It's okay. So, and you work at REI, do you or not?
No.
Where do you work?
Fish and Wildlife Service.
Okay. So what if you had a chance to embezzle $1.6 million for the Fish and Wildlife Service? Would you do it? No, I don't like that little pause in your voice. So I just got to think about this for a second. Okay. Where do you work?
Where do I work?
Yeah.
At one.
Okay. If you had a chance to embezzle $1.6 million from there, would you do it? Okay. Would you? Where do you work?
I work for the state of Minnesota.
Would you? I actually have another great story about the state of Minnesota. Would you embezzle $1.6 million from the state of Minnesota? No, okay.
Wait, are you saying from or for?
From.
Oh, well, that's totally different.
Oh, really? Really now? Okay, so
Totally.
if you had a chance to embezzle $1.6 million from them,
It would depend on who I was embezzling it from.
oh, really? This is interesting. There's a good reason why you're in class today now. Wow, okay. So give me some examples of who you would embezzle from.
I'm turning red, but I'm not red. I'm blue. I would
Uh-huh.
probably try and, I wouldn't embezzle it, but I would do my best to get it from the, okay, Trump administration.
Okay, all right, good, all right.
Because I write grants all the time, but not for $1 million.
Okay, all right. The example I sometimes use, and I don't know what it is about $1.6 million that seems to be the number here, but there was a person, maybe I'll do the story there instead, but I want to come back to you folks here, is he worked for the state of Minnesota Department of Revenue. You work for the Department of Revenue?
No.
Okay, he worked for the Department of Revenue, this is about 15 years ago, and over the course of about a year, so it didn't happen in one fell swoop, embezzled $1.6 million from the state of Minnesota. Eventually got caught, and they interviewed him. Now, I think we will all agree, although you might not, most of us would say embezzling or stealing $1.6 million is wrong. Am I correct? Shake your head, okay. So I say, you didn't shake your head and say, okay, no, I just want to be sure. Okay, shake your head, okay. All right. And we would say what he's done is wrong, and many of us would say maybe he's a bad person. But when we start to pick through it, we find out something more interesting about the story. When they asked him, and by the way, in doing it not once but several times, he obviously had to have thought about it. So this is not like kind of like a what are they looking for? A heat of passion does it, right? What they found is that when he did this and was asked why he did it, he said, well, my wife had stage 4 cancer. She was dying, and we needed some money to pay for some medical bills. And he said, well, I work for the Department of Revenue and thought I could just borrow about $10,000 one month. Use that to pay her medical bills. I'd get a part-time job. I would make that up. No big deal, and nobody would be to the wiser. Month came and went. Bills mounted. Obviously, you can't make $10,000 extra dollars in a month. And it mounted and mounted and mounted. Finally got to $1.6 million. And the reason why I asked that story here is that when we talked about it in class, I then asked everybody the question, well, do you think what he did is still wrong? And some people would say yes. But then I said, do you think he's a bad person? Somebody who stole $1.6 million to try to save the life of his wife. Could you envision yourself if I said to you, for example, I don't know if you're a parent or not, if I said to you, what would you do if your children were really, really ill and you didn't have any money? What would you do to keep them alive? And you might say to me,
Any money somehow.
some money.
Charity.
Or would somebody might maybe say, I might do almost anything? Yeah, perhaps. Any of you, so you see the point here, or have any of you seen the musical or the movie Les Mis? Story of Jean Valjean who steals the loaf of bread to feed his family, who's chased for almost the rest of his life by the inspector. Nobody cheers for the inspector. Everybody cheers for the thief. Right? So the point that I'm getting at here is that think about Jean Valjean, who breaks the law to feed his family, pushed in a desperate situation. The person from the state of Minnesota who steals $1.6 million for the purposes of what? Trying to save his wife's life. Perhaps even good people, if pushed, I want to say, in the right direction or the wrong direction, might wind up doing unethical things. And the reason why I mention that is, again, for so many people who think about ethics, they think it would never be me. If I were to ask my question slightly differently, not the question of would you embezzle $1.6 million, but if I asked the question differently and said, why wouldn't you do it? And I would turn to you and say, I'm assuming you wouldn't embezzle $1.6 million, right? Why wouldn't you do it?
I get caught.
Okay, get caught. Is that would you, why wouldn't you do it?
Feel guilty for
Feel guilty, okay. Although 1.6 million can vary a lot of guilt. Okay. How about you? Why wouldn't you do it?
I would just have a hard time justifying, like you say, maybe the first 10 grand, if
Yeah.
I had a plan to replace it, but
Yeah.
then it probably got too easy. Just,
All right, yeah, all right.
I
But
don't know, it's a slippery slope.
it is right, okay. And we're gonna come back to that concept here, okay? Over time, when I've done this question here, people have told me a variety of things, some of which I consider really good answers, some not as good answers, okay? So, but they're all good. Some people would say to me, and so I'll pick on here, said, well, I wouldn't embezzle because, A, I wouldn't know how to do it. Which kind of makes me think, well, gosh, we really need to write a book called Embezzlement for Dummies. Or someone said to me once, I'm afraid I'd get caught, which of course presupposes, well, what if I didn't get caught? Would I do this? One of my absolute favorites is when somebody said to me, 1.6 million, that's really not that much money when you think about it. I said, develop, and they said, well, by the time you pay state and federal income taxes on that $1.6 million, it would come dramatically below $1 million. Now, I admire the fact that this person understood that you have tax obligations associated, with stealing money. However, I'm not quite sure the reasoning makes sense. But my favorite answers have been people told me, like, that's not how I was raised. It's wrong. That's not who I am, et cetera, et cetera. Again, all getting to this notion that says that who we are as an individual, who we are as a person, has an impact on how we think about ethics. Thus, when we see those stories about people lying, cheating, yelling, whatever like that, committing embezzlement, including this accountant there, we can talk about how what? Obviously, they wear black hats. Obviously, they're bad guys. They're the ones who do really horrible things. But me, the person who's ethical, I would never do that. And therefore, you say, that's why I don't need to be in Schultz's ethics class, because it's a waste of my time, because I would never do things like that whatsoever. Unless, of course, it was Donald Trump, et cetera, like that. So we're going to try to think about that. Now, my things we get here, so why can good people do bad things? Why did that person embezzle the money? And the person I'm referring to is that accountant, or it could be referred to Bernie Madoff, or some of the famous people from the Enron era, Kenneth Lake, Jeffrey Skilling, Bernie Akers. Or how about two of our local fine, upstanding citizens, Denny Hecker. Anybody remember Denny Hecker? Denny Hecker, I think is just getting out of jail right now. Or anybody remember Tom Petters, who ran a wonderful Ponzi scheme, I say dripping with sarcasm, where he claimed that he was buying surplus electronic equipment, buying it for like pennies on the dollar, and then reselling it to Best Buy and these other companies. But of course he wasn't doing it. He never did any of that stuff whatsoever. Eventually gets indicted on 18 counts of fraud, eventually gets convicted, and he sort of wondered why he did this. Now, what becomes fascinating about Tom Petters is that his defense was, at one point, I didn't do anything wrong, it was my subordinates who did it, and plus he said, well, look at how much money I give to charity. I give money to St. John's University, I give to all kinds of charitable organizations. It's got to be proof that I'm a good person. Now, of course, I've had some people say to me, well, it's always easy to give away your money that you own yourself, it's that you've stolen. But you wonder, Tom Petters becomes a fascinating story. When his trial was going on, I remember listening into him on the radio. And again, his whole defense was, I'm basically a decent person. I wouldn't lie, I wouldn't cheat, which meant he put his character into question. The federal government got really smart and said, aha, if he's putting his character in question, we're going to question his character. And they went back and put on the witness stand two of his friends when he was 10 years old. See where I'm going to go into all this in about 2 minutes here. And they asked his friends, what was Tom Petters like as a 10-year-old? And they said, oh, he was a snot. At 10 years old, he was trying to do Ponzi schemes and rip us off way back then. And you sort of think Petters was always holding on. But what about, again, people like Bernie Madoff? Did he just suddenly turn bad? The person who embezzled the money from the state of Minnesota, didn't he suddenly turn bad? Is it possible that good people in organizations do good things? Is it possible to take decent people like you under the right or the wrong circumstances and push you in a way that you might also act unethically? And that's really sort of the premise of what we're playing with here today in terms of understanding about that. And to do that, we're going to start with the Stanley Milgram shock experiment. Has anybody ever seen this? A couple of you have. I can't show the whole thing. I'm going to show about 6 or 7 minutes. If you've seen it and you know what the outcome is, sit on your hands. Sit on your hands so you don't reveal to the rest of the people what's going on for a few minutes here. And I want to show about the first 6 or 7 minutes. I'll simply say it begins in July 1961 at Yale University, 3 months after the beginning of the Eichmann trial. Adolf Eichmann was the person who basically coordinated the trains and logistics to take the Jews to the concentration camps and to Auschwitz, Birkenwald, and to basically their executions and death. It's after World War II, when people are trying to figure out why the Germans and the Japanese did nasty things. And more importantly, it began as a bar bet. Stanley Milgram basically talked to a bunch of other psychologists and said, what if I set up a shock chamber? A chamber where people got doses of electricity at increasing levels. What percentage of them do you think would be willing to go all the way up to 450 volts? So this is our context. Let's see if we can get us up to the video again. We had it before. Oh, wait, that's right. We were doing it. That's right. We were doing, let's see. We were on YouTube. That's right. So let us. Everybody see that? This is old and it's grainy. I know it is.
It is May 1962.
Okay.
An experiment is being conducted in the Elegant Interaction Laboratory at Yale University. The subjects are 40 males between the ages of 20 and 50 residing in the Greater New Haven area. They were obtained by a newspaper advertisement and direct mail solicitation. The subjects range in occupation from corporation presidents to good humormen and plumbers, and in educational level from one who had not finished elementary school to subjects who had doctorate and other professional degrees.
Right here. Now, both of you have been paid, so let me right now. Let me say that the checks that you are simply showing up at the WAC, and from this point on, no matter what happens, the money is yours. I should like to tell both of you a little about the Memory Project. Psychologists have developed several theories to explain how people learn various types of material. Some of the better known theories are treated in the book over there, the Teaching and Learning Process by Cantor. One theory is that people learn things correctly whenever they get punished for making a mistake. A common application of this theory would be when parents spank a child who does something wrong. But actually, we know very little about the effect of punishment on learning. There's almost no truly scientific studies that have made of it in human beings. For instance, we don't know how much punishment is best for learning. And we don't know how much difference it makes as to who's giving the punishment, whether an adult learns best from an older or a younger person himself, and many things of this sort. So what we're doing in the project is bringing together a number of adults of different occupations and ages. And we're asking some of them to be teachers and some to be learners. We wanted to find out just what effect different people have on each other as teachers and learners, and also what effect punishment will have on learning in this situation. Therefore, I'm going to ask one of you to be the teacher here this afternoon, and the other to be the learner. And the way we usually decide is to let you draw these two pieces of paper on which I've written two positions. If this is agreeable to both of you, as you open those, and each of you is word for it to teach your firm. All right, now the next thing we'll have to do is set the learner up so that he gets some sort of punishment. So Leonard, would you step out here with me, please?
That's the best part, the XXX, isn't it?
You want to step right in here, Leonard, and have a seat there. You can leave your coat on the back of that chair if you will. Stay right on. That's fine. Have a seat right here. Put yourself right up to the counter, please. If you may look on, you might while we get set up in here. Would you roll up your right sleeve, please? Left. Now what I'm going to do is strap down your arms to avoid any excessive movement on your back during the experiment. Is that too tight? This electrode is connected to the shock generator in the next room. And this electrode paste is to provide a good contact to avoid any blister or burn. All right, now let me explain to you, learner, exactly what's going to happen and what you're supposed to do. The teacher will read a list of word pairs to you like these. Blue girl, nice day, fat neck, and so forth. You are to try to remember each pair. For the next time through, the teacher will read only the first word or the first half of the word pair. For example, he will say blue. And then he'll read 4 other words, such as boy, girl, grass, hat. Now your job is to remember which one of these 4 other words was originally paired with blue. And you indicate your answer by pressing one of these 4 switches. Now can you reach those, all right? That's fine. Now if the first word I just read, boy, had been paired with blue, you press the first switch, and this will indicate to the teacher that you thought it was the first word. If you thought it had been the second word, girl, you press the second switch, and so forth, and the third word, the third switch, the fourth word, the fourth switch. Now, if you get it correct, fine. If you make an error, however, you will be punished with an electric shock. So, of course, it is to your advantage that you learn all these word pairs as quickly as possible. Do you have any questions now before we go to the next room?
No, but I think I should say this. About 2 years ago, I was at the Veterans Hospital in West Haven. And while there, they detected a heart condition. Nothing serious, but as long as I'm having these shocks, how strong are they? How dangerous are they?
Well, no, although they may be painful, they're not dangerous. Anything else?
No, that's all.
All right, teacher, would you take the test when you see it at the front of the shock generator, please, in the next room? This machine generates electric shocks. When you press one of the switches all the way down, the learner gets a shock. When you release it, the shock stops, you see, like that. The switch will remain in this middle position after you release it to show you which switches you used on the board. Of course, if you press any one of them again, the learner will get another shock.
All subjects are given identical instructions and a sample shock.
The machine is now on to give you, the teacher, an idea of how much shock the learner is getting. I think it's only fair that you receive the sample shock yourself. Are you agreeable with this? Sorry. Would you pull up your right sleeve a little bit, please? All right. I'm going to ask you to close your eyes and estimate the number of volts you receive in the sample shock. Do not open your eyes until I tell you to do so, please. Close them now. Okay, you may open your eyes, and using the voltage scale, here, would you estimate for me the number of volts you receive, please? You may also use the verbal designations, slight, moderate, strong, so forth, to help you. A number, please. About 75. Well, actually, it was 45 here. Although it made it seem stronger because of the electrode paste, it provides a perfect contact. All right, let's go into our instructions. We will begin with this test. You will read each pair of words in this list once to the learner until you've read through the entire list. Direct your voice toward that microphone as the rooms are partially soundproof. After you've read through the list once, you'll go on to the next page. And here, starting from line A, you'll read the word in large letters, along with each of the other words in the line. For example, the first line you read, blue, boy, girl, grass, hat. Now, after you've read the four choices, the learner pushes one of the switches on the board in front of him, and the number he has selected will light up in this box, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Now, if he gives the correct answer, you say correct and go on to the next line. The correct answer is underlined and is also indicated in the right margin. If he were to indicate the wrong answer, you would say wrong. Then tell him the number of volts you're going to give him. Then give him the punishment. Then read the correct word pair once. And then go on to the next line. For example, if he indicated 3 for blue, you would say wrong. 15 volts. You press and release the switch. Read blue girl, and then go on to the next line. Now, each time he gives a wrong answer, you move up one switch on the shock generator. And it's important that you follow this procedure exactly. So to help you, let me go through it again very quickly. I would suggest you read the list and the test at a brisk pace to keep it moving. And of course, we'll begin with 15 volts for the first wrong answer. Okay? Do not begin until I say ready, begin. Attention, learner, your teacher is about to begin the test. Try and remember the word pairs. Ready? Begin.
Blue girl, nice day, fat neck.
The early stages of the test pass uneventfully.
Incorrect. We're now get a shock of 75 volts. Soft air. He kind of did some yelling in there. Incorrect. You'll now get a shock of 105 volts. Hard head. Just how far can you go in this thing?
As far as necessary.
What do you mean as far as is necessary?
Complete the test.
I sure don't know the effect of this thing, and I'm a little skeptical about electricity.
The experiment requires you to go on to
Incorrect. 150 volts. Sad face.
That's all. Get me out of here. I told you I had my trouble. My heart's starting to bother me down. Get me out of here, please. My heart's starting to bother me. I refuse to go on. Let me out.
I think we ought to find out what's wrong in there first.
The experiment requires you to continue.
Well, the experiment might require that we continue, but I still think we should find out what the condition of the gentleman is.
As I said before, although the shocks may be painful, they're not dangerous.
Look, I don't know anything about electricity. I don't profess any knowledge, nor will I go any further until I find out the guy's okay.
It's absolutely essential that you continue.
Well, essential or not, this program isn't quite that important to me that I should go along doing something that I know nothing about, particularly if it's going to injure someone. I don't know what this is all about.
Well, whether the learner likes it or not, we must go on until he's learned all the word pairs correctly.
Well, you can sure have your 450 back. I didn't want it anyhow. I intend to give it some cattle organization. I would go with it.
The 450 is not the issue here. That check is yours.
Yeah, I read it.